The regular broadcast of the Minneapolis Heritage Preservation Commission will now begin.
Good afternoon. Welcome to this live broadcast of our virtual meeting of the September 14th, 2021 regular meeting of the Minneapolis Heritage Preservation Commission. This meeting includes the remote participation of members as authorized under Minnesota Statute Section 13D.021 due to the declared local health pandemic. For the record, my name is Madeline Sundberg and I serve as chair of the Minneapolis Heritage Preservation Commission. I will now call this meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll so we may verify the presence of a quorum.
Commissioner Bjornberg.
Present.
Commissioner Booty.
Present.
Commissioner Howard.
Present.
Commissioner Johnson.
Present.
Nystrom has notified us that she will not be joining us this evening. Commissioner Sandbolt.
Present.
Well, this might be a little wacky, but almost like the same.
Thank you for bearing with me through that. Commissioner Stady. Commissioner Struthers.
Present.
Commissioner Sundberg.
Present.
Vandereyck.
Here.
8 members present.
Thank you. Let the record reflect we do have quorum. With that, we will proceed to our agenda, a copy of which was posted for public access to the city's legislative information management system, which is available at lims.minneapolismn.gov. Our first order of business is to adopt the agenda for this meeting. We'll work from the agendas that are available online. I will go through the agenda and sort out what items will be continued to a future meeting, what items will be discussed, and what items will be put on the consent agenda to be approved as recommended by staff without further discussion. So item number 4 is 419 Washington Avenue North, Ward 3, Certificate of Appropriateness. This item will be discussed. And item number 5, 2901 Brookwood Terre, Ward 13, Landmark Nomination. This item will be continued to the September 28th, 2021 meeting. So the proposed agenda, item number 4, 419 Washington Avenue North, will have staff presentation, public comment, commission discussion, and action. And 2901 Brookwood Terre will be continued for one cycle. Commissioners, may I have a motion to approve the proposed agenda?
Johnson, so moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Is there a second?
Bjornberg seconds.
Thank you, Commissioner Bjornberg. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to call a roll on the motion.
Commissioner Bjornberg.
Aye.
Commissioner Booty.
Aye.
Howard.
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
Commissioner Sandbolt.
Aye.
Commissioner Stady. Commissioner Struthers.
Aye.
Commissioner Vandereyck.
Aye.
Sundberg.
Aye.
That's 7, or yes, that's 8 yeas, and yeah, that's 8 yeas and 0 nays.
Thank you. Let the record reflect the agenda is approved. Our next order of business will be to approve the minutes from our August 24th, 2021 meeting. May I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved. This is Howard.
Thank you, Commissioner Howard. Is there a second?
Johnson, seconds.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to call a roll on the motion.
Commissioner Bjornberg.
Aye.
Booty.
Aye.
Commissioner Howard.
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
Commissioner Sandbolt.
Aye.
Commissioner Stady. Commissioner Struthers.
Aye.
Commissioner Van Der Eyck.
Aye.
Chair Sundberg.
Aye.
That's 8 yeas and 0 nays.
Thank you. The minutes are approved. Before I open the hearing to public comments, let me summarize the process for conducting the public hearing in this virtual format. The process will be as follows. First, we will act on any items to be continued. Then we'll take each remaining agenda item in order. First, the planning staff will present its report and commissioners may ask questions of staff. Then we will hear from the applicant and commissioners may ask questions of the applicant. After that, I will open the public hearing and will invite public comment. First, we'll take speakers in the order they pre-registered. If there are any, speakers will be limited to 2 minutes. When your name is called, please state your name and address for the record and then proceed to your comments. After you've completed the list of pre-registered speakers, I'll check to see if there are any other speakers in the queue who may have called in. In order to activate your microphone, you'll need to press *6 on the keypad and then wait to hear the pre-recorded message before you begin speaking. So again, I'll take the pre-registered speakers in order and then open the floor to any other speakers in the queue. Remember to state your name and address before making your comments. Please keep your comments to the specific application that is before us today. After the public comments are complete, I will close the hearing. Commissioners will deliberate and act on the application before us. So our first item is item number 5, 2901 Brookwood Terre, Ward 13, landmark nomination. This item was recommended to be continued 1 cycle to the September 28th, 2021 meeting. For the record, the plan number printed in the agenda was incorrect. It should be 13259. And so I would like to check to make sure that nobody called in on this item before we continue it. So I will open the public hearing and just check if anyone wishes to speak for or against this application. If you could press *6 and let me know that you are there. Okay, doesn't seem like anybody has called in. So I will close the public hearing for item number 5. And can I get a motion to continue this item?
Van Der Eyck so moves.
Thank you, Commissioner Van Der Eyck. Is there a second?
Bjornberg seconds.
Thank you, Commissioner Bjornberg. Any discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll on the motion?
Commissioner Bjornberg.
Aye.
Commissioner Booty.
Aye.
Commissioner Howard.
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
Commissioner Sandbolt.
Aye.
Commissioner Stady. Commissioner Struthers.
Aye.
Commissioner Van Der Eyck.
Aye.
Chair Sundberg.
Aye.
8 yeas and 0 nays.
Thank you. That item number 5, 2901 Brookwood Terre is continued to the September 28th meeting of the HPC. Our next item number 4, which is 419 Washington Avenue North, Ward 3, Certificate of Appropriateness. We'll have the staff report presented by Rob Skolecki.
Thank you, Chair Sundberg. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Rob Skolecki, City Planner in the Historic Preservation section of CPED. Today I'm presenting a Certificate of Appropriateness application for changes to 419 Washington Avenue North in the Warehouse Historic District. Next slide, please. The subject property is a non-contributing resource in the Warehouse Historic District. It was recently completed as new infill in 2019, which you can actually see here in the aerial that is dated from early 2019, the property under construction. The design for the building was approved by the Heritage Preservation Commission in 2017 through Certificate of Appropriateness Plan 3355. The building that's the subject of this application is addressed as 241 Fifth Avenue North and shares a parcel with a contributing resource at 419 Washington Avenue North, which was built in 1913. The contributing building at 419 Washington Avenue North is not proposed to be altered as part of this application. The subject building's front or west-northwest elevation faces 5th Avenue North, which is identified as a freight street in the Warehouse Historic District Design Guidelines. The south or southwest elevation at 3rd Street North is classified as a commercial street. While a bridge historically existed to span 3rd Street North across the adjacent rail corridor, the subject section of 3rd Street North now dead ends at that rail corridor, which currently gives this section a feeling of a freight or commercial area. The subject building was designed and approved, as I stated, in 2017 with Freight Street, which is again the 5th Avenue North side orientation, rather than the commercial street, which is the 3rd Street North. Next slide, please. The proposed alterations to the new building are limited to the addition of metal canopies to shelter the main entries at the building's primary elevations, 3rd Street North, which is south again, and 5th Avenue North, which is west. A new concrete walkway platform addition with a metal railing is also proposed to extend the westernmost side of the south elevation to be clad in brick with stone caps to match the building's materials. And it's located at an uneven grade where an entry is currently present. The project also proposes a planter system to replace part of an entry step at the area of the 5th Avenue North entry. For signs, the applicant is proposing illuminated metal letter canopy signs at both canopies to help identify the building and its entrances. A master sign plan was approved for the building in 2019 and included wall signs at the height where the canopy signs are proposed. However, these signs were never installed, the wall signs, that is, in relation to the previous master sign plan. Next slide, please. The Department of Community Planning and Economic Development has analyzed the certificate of appropriateness to alter entry areas and install new signage at the 241 Fifth Avenue North building, located at 419 Washington Avenue in the Warehouse Historic District based on the following findings. Under the Minneapolis Warehouse Historic District Design Guidelines, changes to buildings completed following the period of significance are evaluated under the guidelines for new buildings and infill. As such, for design for new buildings related to fenestration, canopies, and awnings, the proposed canopies complement the fenestration of the building and are proposed to help better identify existing main entries. The canopies will be metal and will be of similar scale and materials to existing canopies in the Warehouse Historic District and at neighboring properties. While the canopies will be located a maximum of 27 feet and 2 inches from sidewalk grade to the top of the canopy, the placement itself is consistent with the already existing approved large 2-story entry and ground floor at the 5th Avenue North location, and it's in scale and character with the large opening and tall ground floor, which accommodates an uneven grade at the property. Next slide, please. The project does meet the guidelines for materials. The existing principal material of the subject building is brick. Metal accent is already present at the building in lighting, trim, windows, and other minor details. The introduction of metal for the proposed canopies and railing is allowed. The addition of the south brick-clad concrete walkway will use material features that are already present at the building. The proposed project, however, does not meet the guidelines specific to the Warehouse District street system as outlined in the guidelines. The new planter proposed for the 5th Avenue North Freight Street side of the building is not advised in the guidelines for freight streets, but street trees and amenities are advised on commercial or mixed streets. Thus, staff has conditioned that the planter be moved to the 3rd Street North commercial street side to meet the guidelines, which is also consistent with the building's original approval, which shows vegetation along the 3rd Street North side of the building, with no vegetation along the 5th Avenue North. And I've included that site plan as well as that landscape plan later on to have for reference. Next slide, please. Staff understands that this is an unusual location where a historic commercial street no longer functions in the same way as it originally had when a bridge linked 3rd Street North at this location over the adjacent rail corridor during the period of significance for the district, which you can see here in both photos. And the photo on the left, there's an arrow pointing to the location of the current extant building. The proposed south or southwest elevation walkway platform and railing addition will be on the commercial street, but it will aid the building access and pedestrian activity at the side, along with the new canopy and signage. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned, this is actually the original site plan from the previous approval, the Certificate of Appropriateness Plan 3388 for the new construction. And then if you go to the next slide as well, please. Thank you for the landscape plan showing vegetation at this elevation. The proposed signs, the Minneapolis Heritage Preservation Commission design guidelines for on-premise signs and awnings do specify that canopy signs are not allowed, which is being proposed. However, the HPC has recently considered and approved canopy signs that are thoughtful and intentioned and either serve a historic function or better suit the needs of a particular property. The subject canopy signs are appropriate given their metal materials, their internal illumination, their size is compatible with the proposed new canopies and the building scale, and they'll serve to identify the pedestrian access areas at the current primary elevation entries. The proposed signs are also similar to the approvable wall signs or projecting signs in the areas of size, illumination, and materials. With staff conditions, the proposed project at the subject building maintains compatibility within the Warehouse Historic District and meets the Secretary of the Interior standards. As conditioned, the project meets the heritage preservation policies in the Minneapolis 2040 Comprehensive Plan by protecting the Warehouse Historic District from alterations that are not sensitive to its historic significance and by requiring new construction to be compatible with historic fabric. With that, the Department of Community Planning and Economic Development recommends that the Heritage Preservation Commission adopt staff findings for the application by Katie Quizzle of Perkins & Will to alter entry areas and install new signage at the 241 5th Avenue North building in the Warehouse Historic District, and recommend to approve the Certificate of Appropriateness to alter entry areas and install new signage at the 241 5th Avenue North building located at 419 Washington Avenue North in the Warehouse Historic District, subject to the following conditions. The proposed planters at the 5th Avenue North side of the building are not approved. Planters may be moved to locations on the 3rd Street North side of the building, which is a commercial street, to remain consistent with the recommendations in the guidelines and the proposed landscape design approved previously for the building's construction. And the other two conditions are standard conditions of approval for this application. With that, I'm available for any questions, but I do understand that the applicant or the applicant team representatives are here to speak as well if needed. Thanks.
Thank you, Rob. Are there any questions for staff? I don't see any questions at this time. So I will now open the public hearing for this item. I believe the applicant is here to speak. If you could press *6 on your phone and wait to hear the pre-recorded message to activate your microphone, and then state your name and address for the record. I have John Slack followed by Ryan Forrester on my list, but if you would like to switch the order within the applicant team, that's fine. Just let me know who's speaking first.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hi, this is John Slack with Perkins & Will. Let's see, I have some other individuals. So Ryan Forrester, I'm not sure if he's able to unmute. but I submitted a brief presentation. Is that something that we can bring up?
Let's see.
Actually,
yep,
Ryan might have submitted it.
We're seeing a slide that says Crestlight Capital.
Yes, that's
okay.
it.
You're good to go.
Obviously the video for me is a little bit slower, but I'll try to navigate through that. So we have the owner, Kelly Lim, who's with Crestlight, and we also have David Wood, who's the owner's rep with Ancoats, and they didn't register, so they were actually watching this. And so unfortunately they weren't able to get on to speak, but what I'll do is I'll try to navigate through this presentation pretty quickly, and then if you have any other questions. So you should be seeing the Crestlight Capital image on the slideshow, and Crestlight is a group out of Detroit, and most recently they've made some investments within Minneapolis, including River Place in Northeast, and then subsequently the parcel that we're building that we're talking about tonight. And as part of this project and also the River Place project, what they're doing is looking to create tenant improvements. And then most specifically for this project, there was just really a lot of unfinished components to this building project that they're looking to make improvements, which is part of the presentation tonight. Can you go to the next slide? So the next slide is just a image of the building from Fifth Avenue. And we'll go to the next slide. The next slide has a series of images. There's 4 images on the sheet or on the screen. Most specifically, I'll talk to the furthest right image on the top row, which you can see as a set of stairs, and then the lower image, which is basically the street frontage, building frontage along Fifth Avenue. One of the key things that the ownership group wanted to look at was the entry to the building. And as you can see in the street frontage image, the image along the bottom of the screen, there are some grade challenges. So some of the existing grades on the existing public sidewalk are greater than 5%. And then once you get down to the main entrance of the building, which is pretty nondescript, the main entrance sets back from the property line. So it's somewhat nondescript and becomes somewhat challenging as it relates to access as well as water penetration from not only from the street but also from the rain. And then if you look at the image in the upper right-hand corner, you're seeing one of those steps. So that's the steps that's on the right side of the entry. So it's a second column, set of columns. And you can see that there are some challenges with the grade through there. I think it's about a little over 5%. So you can see that there are some half steps. There's steps that sort of work into the grade. And previous owner had to do some modifications to the steps, including painting the steps to be able to ensure that the steps weren't a tripping hazard. So that was definitely one thing that the new ownership group wanted to look at. The second thing is that with the grade, the sidewalk through this section actually slopes back to the building. And then the fact that the building opening is so wide, there's a lot of water that gets into that interior space, the interior entry space. So there's a lot of challenges with ice in the winter. Obviously, there's challenges with a rain coming in to the space. And after a rainstorm, there's usually some standing water down in that lower area before you enter into the building. And so that was one of the key drivers for wanting us to look at how we can modify the entry to make it better. That including just really highlighting the entry. I think as a pedestrian or somebody in a vehicle, it's really hard to drive past this building and really see where the entry is. Why don't we go to the next slide? Next slide has 5 images. Part of this project, we're also looking at roof modifications, which are part of the application. Next slide, which is slide 6, just shows a 3D expanded view of the building and essentially all the projects that we're working on currently within the building. So there's the roof at the very top. There's multiple floor related improvements, and then you have the main entrance at the bottom. And then the next slide, slide 7. I don't know if the YouTube will catch up, but maybe not, so I'll just keep talking. So slide 7 is just a view of our design solution for that primary entrance. And so in addition to the canopy as a way to sort of highlight the entry to the building, there was a decision made to look at creating some structure or some way of improving not only the slope of the sidewalk, but then also the entrance into that lower part of the building that accesses the front door. So as part of our design thinking, we're looking at reconstructing a little bit over half of the sidewalk. So half of the frontage of the sidewalk in front of the building will be reconstructed. We will eliminate the slopes that are greater than 5%, and we'll actually also pitch the sidewalk back towards the curb, which currently now a lot of that actually pitches to the building. And then to sort of create an area that is truly accessible, we designed this planter. So that's what you're seeing in the image. On the right side of the image at the entrance, you have the steps. So the steps are designed to not have any of those sort of weird elevational changes. And then at the bottom of the image, you see that there's an accessible entrance. We also wanted to try to minimize the impact of water getting into the space. And so that planter also does that. So not only with the pitching of the sidewalk, we're also preventing water to getting into that lower space by, almost 2/3. And as a way to also highlight the entrance to the building, the idea came out of creating a planter. The planter obviously will be seen not only as you're walking along the street frontage, but then also the main lobby on the inside of the building looks out to this. And so rather than just kind of looking out to a blank wall, we wanted to create some sort of interest, not only during the summer, but also in the winter with some color and texture within that space. If you go to the next slide, you're sort of seeing the straight-on view along 5th Avenue of what this planter looks like. So the planter follows the street grade. We're able, again, to eliminate the 5% slopes or greater than 5% slopes that exist along 5th Avenue. We have the really defined stairway entrance on the right, and then we have the accessible entrance on the left. If you go to the last slide, slide number 9, based on staff recommendations, we really have a strong desire to create this planter for some of the reasons that I mentioned. But this last image on slide 9 represents potentially what this would look like if it were just a wall, as a way to not only pick up the grade, but also to define the stairs and the accessible entrance on the lower part of the building. And so these two set of images identify what that wall element would look like. Obviously, it's not an element that really sort of helps to identify an entrance to the space. It doesn't become very utilitarian because I think you can only really sit on the street side. The inside of the wall is a little bit too tall to sit on. And it's just not as aesthetically pleasing. It still functions in the way of minimizing stormwater access into the space. But this is sort of what potentially that concrete wall could look like if it weren't a planter. We have some other slides that we don't need to go through. Specifically, I think as part of this presentation, we really wanted to focus on staff's point number 1, which was the proposed planters and the fact that staff recommends not approving this, and wanted to sort of get some feedback from the commission on the option around a planter versus just a wall in that space.
Thank you, John. Did the other member of the team wish to speak?
Oh, I'm sorry. Are you guys, are you able to hear me?
There, now I can hear you.
Okay. No, John summarized, this is Ryan from Perkins & Will. John summarized everything perfectly, so I have nothing to add.
Okay. Now that we've heard from the applicant, I'd like to check to make sure if there's anyone else who is called in wishing to speak for or against this application or to alter staff findings. There aren't any other pre-registered speakers, but if there's anyone else in the queue, If you could press *6 on your phone, wait to hear the message, and let me know that you are there.
I will add real quick that we did meet with the Neighborhood Association last month and presented this project in its entirety. So we presented sort of improvements within the building, the rooftop, as well as this ground level. And we received support from the neighborhood, and that we had quite a bit of conversations around the public realm and the opportunities to green up the public realm. And I do know from at least from the guidelines that that's not, a primary recommendation, especially for Fifth Avenue, but we did receive support from the neighborhood in support of what was presented.
Okay, well, and I don't see anybody else calling in. If that is it from the applicant's team, I will close the public hearing. I'd like the record to reflect that Commissioner Stady is now present, and open this up to commissioner discussion. What are people's feelings on the planters versus the wall? I get the functional aspect of wanting to keep water out of the entryway, but I'm curious what other commissioners' feelings are. Commissioner Sandbolt.
Yeah, I understand that the guidelines are kind of intended to, keep the kind of green areas to a minimum because that it doesn't really fit in this district. So I think, large lawns and large areas of landscaping aren't appropriate. However, this planter I feel like is small enough and kind of, allows for, like you said, a different sense of scale and designation of the entry. I feel like the planter is kind of small enough that I think it would be okay, but want to hear what other commissioners think as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Sandbolt. Commissioner Johnson.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Commissioner Sandbolt. I am not going to, belabor a couple of planters on a freight street versus a commercial street. I actually think that anytime a developer wants to put plants anywhere in the city, I am in full support of that. Maybe if they put them on 3rd and 5th Street would be great. But yeah, this tends not to bother me as much, and I don't mind the planters on 5th.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Commissioner Vander Eyck.
So I think that the plantings in the warehouse district tends to be one of our more controversial items for our design guidelines. And perhaps it's something that we should talk a little bit more about in our next retreat. I mean, I agree with the other commissioners' statements that this is fairly subdued, feels like it still fits within the context of the area today and the way it's gone today. And so we have to think, I think we have to think more broadly about what we're preserving, and what we're chasing there from a historic guideline aspect, and the ways that the whole community in what we now call the North Loop has changed over time, and so that's a little tough to litigate over our HPC meetings, obviously. And I think probably our guidelines aren't specific enough to allow applicants the flexibility to add green space and green entourage to their buildings to soften some of the kind of like the concrete of the space without, creating big, like Commissioner Sandbolt said, like big, huge front lawns and stuff like that would be inappropriate to the historic context of the warehouse district. So all that is to say that I feel comfortable allowing the planters, and I would say as far as legal findings go, the mitigating factors in that would be that they are smaller planters, that they're set back a bit and closer to the building, and it's not, in my opinion, not in keeping with the neighborhood overall. It's still a concrete planter with some plants on the top of it. So that's why I feel comfortable allowing it, and I feel that those are sufficient findings for that. But I think that it's worth making note that this is probably something we should talk a little bit more at length about potentially amending our guidelines to be a little bit more flexible, allow this a little bit more so that we can, you know, balance these two things. We both want the warehouse district to feel like a warehouse district, but we also want it to feel like a welcoming space that people want to be in, and plantings often can do that. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Commissioner Van Der Eyck. Commissioner Struthers.
I'd like to just second particularly what Commissioner Van Der Eyck just said, a couple of points. One being, I think if we want people to reuse these buildings, and I realize this is a new non-conforming building, but if we want them to be used, whether offices or as residences or whatever, it seems to me that we need to be attuned to the fact that people who work and live there may appreciate certain things that aren't in our guidelines right now. And I think to take this issue at an upcoming retreat and really talk about it on a broader basis might be very helpful.
Thank you, Commissioner Struthers. I think the commissioners who have spoken have raised some good points. I agree that on the sense of the scale of the building, that these planters are relatively small. It's not the same thing as a giant lawn. I think, you know, not in a condition sort of sense, but in a recommendation sort of sense. I would love if the plantings, I think we often use the word or like, what is it? They're more naturalized or irregular in appearance in the planters, not like a super formal thing, something that gives a little bit more of the feeling of plants that just sprouted up in the warehouse district. Would be nice, but I don't feel like it's a necessary condition because it is such a small area. I also appreciate that these planters have a functional purpose instead of being purely decorative. I guess to me that changes it a little bit too. But these are a functional industrial sort of item that just happens to also have some plants. Commissioners, I'm wondering if there is anyone else who would like to speak on this item, or if somebody would like to make a motion. Commissioner Sandbolt.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the certificate of appropriateness to alter the entry areas as proposed in the agenda, but strike condition number 1 as was listed in the agenda.
Thank you, Commissioner Sandbolt. Is there a second?
Howard seconds.
Thank you, Commissioner Howard. I'd like to check with staff to make sure that you feel like our findings and discussion are clear, or if you need clarification on anything.
No clarification needed. That's clear.
Thanks, Rob. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to call a roll on the motion.
Commissioner Bjornberg.
Aye.
Commissioner Booty.
Aye.
Commissioner Howard.
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
Commissioner Sandbolt.
Aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Struthers.
Aye.
Commissioner Van Der Eyck.
Aye.
Commissioner Sundberg.
Aye.
9 yeas and 0 nays.
Thank you. That motion passes. The applicant may speak to staff tomorrow about next steps. That concludes our public hearing items tonight. Commissioners or staff, are there any announcements or new commission business to discuss? announcements? Okay. Seeing none, with that, we have completed all items on the agenda for this meeting. I will again ask members and staff if there are any other matters to come before this meeting.
Nothing additional from staff. Thank you.
There being no other business this meeting, if not and without objection, I will declare this meeting adjourned. The next regular meeting of the HPC is September 28th, 2021. Thank you, everyone.